Welcome into another edition of Inside Eagle Nation, live here from Allen E. Paulson Stadium. Colin, Lacy alongside the voice of the Eagles, Danny Reed. We also have a very special guest here with us in the booth, Benko, Director of Athletics. Appreciate you joining us.
I appreciate it. I don't know what would qualify special, but I appreciate it.
It's been a busy day for you. You've had the all-staff meeting, kind of the kickback, getting everybody back in the swing of things to start the athletic year. Why was it so important to you, one, to get everybody back in person? A lot of the athletic department meetings had been in Zoom previous to that, but why was it so important for you to get everybody back in the same room, get everybody back and rolling?
Yeah, I think like anybody that's gone through obviously the transition from toggling in person to offline or online, I should say, with Zoom, it's just not the same just in terms of being with people and being in a room. And so today we had a chance, I believe it was our May meeting, we were at JI as a staff meeting and did that as the first one in person since I was hired. And so today was a chance, obviously, to get back in front of everybody and really kind of set the expectations and the tone and the excitement for the year ahead. As I mentioned, y'all were both in there, and we talked about just the successes of last season. But, again, quite frankly, the bar is much higher than we did last year, both academically and athletically, and that kind of leads into why we set the strategic plan. I hit on that this morning, and we're going to be aspirational here. I mentioned with all the coaches and staff in there that I can just speak for myself. I personally didn't come to Georgia Southern to just be good in football. We want to be good in all 17 sports and have comprehensive excellence on and off the field, and we're not going to stop until we achieve that.
You mentioned that it took roughly 6 months with a steering committee, getting input and feedback from a lot of different parts of this university to be able to put forth this strategic plan. But you also emphasized this morning in the all-staff meeting that you had to make sure that athletically you were aligning with the university. Yeah. So how did you consider everything to be able to make sure that the athletic department was seeing things the same way as Georgia Southern University was?
No, that's a great question, Danny. It's funny. It's the first time I've actually undergone or really gone through a whole process, cradle to grave, on a strategic plan. And, it's kind of slow out of the gates because you had to make sure you had the right constituents and the right stakeholders at the seat of the table, make sure you're covering all the areas you needed to cover. And so it was a lot of kind of moving chairs on a deck, per se, to make sure you get the right buckets and the right people there at the seat of the table. And then from there is ideation of where do we want to go. And then really, if you want to get down to the quantitative way of measuring, is going to be the initiative. So we have 29 objectives.
Yeah.
Those 29 objectives really are kind of our blueprint and our North Star for success. But in essence, like any plan, if you don't execute it, it doesn't really amount to a hill of beans. So you've got to execute on it. And so that's where the initiatives come into play. And then what we did is, and we didn't talk about it today, but our senior leadership, we actually had key stakeholders and those that are responsible for each initiative. And we're going to track on that. And each year we'll do a summer update of how we did. As I'm sure we'll have some successes and we'll have some areas that we got to get better at. And that's the way, from a peer accountability standpoint, it's important. And then as you talk about the university, we already have, Dr. Marrero is a visionary leader. We already have KPIs and quarterly tasks, and we're tracking on that. There's a lot of overlap. But what you'll see, a common theme with the university and with us, is we're going to have alignment.
Yeah.
And that alignment from top to bottom is hopefully exemplified in my relationship with Dr. Marrero and throughout the department.
One of the things I wanted to touch on before we get into the nuts and bolts of what this strategic plan looks like over the next 5 years, but there were a lot of people that went into putting this together. You talked about the amount of time it took to do so, but you had the main steering committee, but then you also had 5 subcommittees that were kind of tasked with the overarching 5 different themes, with student-athlete success, competitive excellence, resource optimization, brand engagement and fan experience, and then do right, diversity, and integrity. Mm-hmm. Talk about putting people in positions to be on those committees, to use their talents and what they were good at to the best part of making this.
Yeah, it's funny, and I've looked at this document so much, and yet I have yet to memorize it, so I've got a lot more reading to do. But I'll tell you, it was interesting. So we started with, just a couple buckets of people. We had, leaders in our department. We had leaders on campus, on the president's cabinet. We had current student athletes. We had former student athletes. We had our steering committee was primarily comprised of our executive board for the athletic foundation, also at FAR, Dr. Geierman, and at Dr. Tawana Wilson. And so we had a good cross-section. And then we took athletic staff, and, Colin is interested in some ways we put people in areas or buckets where, for example, Brian Johnson does a great job with communications. Well, Brian's going to be, I believe he was in the no, looking at it, yeah, the brand engagement fan experience. That font's too small, I can't really. But Brian, that's his natural inclination. But we also found some areas where people kind of outside their area of expertise, but we thought they could add value. And part of that is, really this goal is to align Georgia Southern athletics and the university for the next 5 years, right? But that's not the only objective. We really wanted to make sure, beyond addressing student-athlete needs and whatnot, we wanted to help our staff continue to grow professionally and personally. And so there were some opportunities where we could sit there and say, hey, this person, while they could provide valuable feedback and advice in this bucket, we're going to put them in this bucket to stretch them a little bit and make them uncomfortable. And we talked about that this morning. We talked about being uncomfortable is where you find greatness. And I want our staff in a good way to be uncomfortable this year, to get outside of their comfort zone and to embrace the unexpected. And I'll give you a case in point. We talked about this morning, too, about with our external group last week, is each person, right, should find one time, especially a home game at Paulson, Hanner, J.I., to make a wow moment with our fans and patrons. One wow moment. And you think about the compounding way that happens over the course of a season. So each of us plays a vital role within the department, and then conversely with a strategic plan is a way to bring everybody together.
Objectives, initiatives. This is 32 pages long in Eagle Nation. You can go on gseagles.com to read this in its entirety. If you have any questions for Jared, feel free to submit those on Facebook Live. But in reading through this, one thing that sticks out, you have given the people that are working for you, but also giving the fans an idea of goals that can be reached. They may seem like they're going to take a while to get to them, but these are attainable goals. You're not just going to put numbers out there just to say, hey, this is what we're going to try to do, but these are attainable goals if we all can push in the same direction.
Yeah, I don't like to waste people's time or waste my time, and so we wouldn't have put this plan together if we didn't think it was achievable. Now, some things are going to be it's like any plan. You have some not low-hanging fruit, but you have some things that I hope to achieve here in this next year. Some are probably 2-3 years out, and some are 4 or 5 years out. And like any plan, if you look at a 1 to 5 scale, you're probably going to end up in that 3 scale where some get done, some don't.
Yeah.
But it gives you something to shoot for. If we hit everything out of the gates and we've made it too easy, I think this is a good balance of some stuff that, quite honestly, is aspirational in a good way. Some things, if we continue the path we're on, we're going to hit. And some we ought to hit right out of the gates next year. And so part of that is trying to get some early wins. And then part of that is, again, we talked about is pushing people outside of their comfort zones and really, and y'all know how much I despise complacency. We are not going to be a complacent organization. And so part of that is be innovative, forward-thinking. All of us need to have a growth mindset. And so that's what we're trying to talk about as a department. And so as we tackle these tasks, yes, sometimes they're going to be totally out of the blue. And some things you're like, you know what, that's something we probably should aim for. We just haven't really put it on paper and benchmarked it. And so I'm excited because it's a chance for everybody in the department. And y'all touched on this morning. Everyone plays a vital role. And so if this person here, this person there doesn't do their job to the level we expected, well, then it's going to impact our student-athlete experience. It's going to impact our donor and fan experience, and that's our priorities.
The good thing is that Reggie Simpkins already guaranteed the 3.2 GPA is going to be met this year, so that's one thing off the plate already.
Yeah, we brought that up, and he's like, is that 3.1? I said, no, that's 3.2. But you know what? I mean, I think that, we go back to the mission and vision. Our vision is to be the preeminent Group of 5 school, which makes you one of the best in the country. And based on our results, we're not there yet. And so we're going to work like crazy, and we're going to work smart, but band everybody together. So a lot of things, the undercurrent, Danny Dahl, kind of to your point, the undercurrent to everything in this plan is culture.
Yeah.
Sure. We're trying to get the culture in a good spot, and that's going to take a lot of work. And really, as y'all have heard me say before, culture is an amoeba. Yeah. It's constantly moving and constantly cajoling. And so we have to sit there and say, all right, yes, we have some new people here, but how do they bring value? And our hope is that every person we add to the department increases their production. And then conversely, those that are here, we're playing a small role in helping them reach their full potential. And that's our goal is, and y'all have heard me say this, is everyone in the department, our goal is to help you, Danny, and Colin, everyone be the best version of themselves. And that looks differently. Everyone has different goals and different aspirations. That's okay. That's what makes us a great department. But we're going to help each person reach that full potential. And then the derivative of that is we're going to be the best we have ever been as a department.
You dive through the 5 different priorities that the strategic plan touches on. The first one is student-athlete success, and I think a lot of times people kind of tunnel that into academics. But the thing that I like about this section is it covers everything from, yes, it touches on the academic, the APR, the graduation rate, but you also go into the APEX program and the mental health aspect of it too.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to say, hey, we're going to shoot for this GPA and graduate student-athletes. And that's a core process and an achievable goal for us. But as I share with our coaches today, I mean, we are tasked with an awesome responsibility of playing a really important role in the lives of our young men and women. And as I share with our coaches, I don't expect our student athletes to always like our coaches. It's not about a likability contest. It's about mutual respect. And and I also share with our student athletes getting ready to talk to them is I don't expect our coaches to be their friend. Our coaches are extensions of their parents.
Sure.
And ultimately, student-athlete success to me, Colin, to your point, and that's why we have more than just APR and GPA, is how are we developing these young men and women to springboard out of Statesboro, right, and out of Georgia Southern. And not only springboard, but become an industry titan, become someone that's become a great mom, dad, husband, wife, whatever. And so a lot of this is, yes, we're going to focus on the things on campus, but everything's done with a trajectory of 5 or 10 years out. And really the hope is, when you say student-athlete experience, is are we preparing our young men and women for 5, 10 years out? And what you'll see is, for all of us, we've had different people in our lives that have been influential, whether it be parents, a coach, whatever. Well, sometimes those conversations, as my grandma used to say, we have those come to Jesus talks, and sometimes those are just conversations that aren't fun, but we're also dealing with 18 to 22-year-old young men and women, and we have to have grace and understand that they're going to make mistakes, but also, too, is really important to help them grow and learn from it. And one of the last things I'll share is one of the best things my parents did was allow me to make mistakes. And as I said this morning, it's not foolish mistakes like crossing a four-lane interstate like on Fair Road at lunchtime, right? That's like playing Frogger, right? but it's more about saying, hey, listen, we're going to give you we're going to empower you to make a decision. And then when mistakes happen, why did it happen? What would you do differently? And then how do we correct that for the future? So.
The second one being competitive excellence. And the first part of this is something that I haven't necessarily heard of being quantified this way. And the first point is qualify 50% of the 17 sports programs for NCAA or bowl postseason play. And I think it goes to the point that you've talked about ever since you got here of impacting all 17 sports that Georgia Southern has, but also holding them to kind of the same standard.
Yeah, well, just again, y'all know me, I'm very candid and honest. I mean, there were several sports within our department that just were whether it be neglected or just weren't made a priority. And particularly on our women's sides, the women's sports programs here at Georgia Southern have a ton of potential. And I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that our best days are ahead. And that's for all sports, particularly our women's sports. And so as you think about laying this out, our Learfield Cup standings, which is easiest way to describe it is kind of an index of all sports across the spectrum in college athletics. I think it counts 19 sports. We only have 17. Yeah. But still, we had our highest finish here this past year. And you think about on the heels of obviously a bowl win, but also men's golf and women's tennis making the postseason. And so it was the highest finish since the 12-13 season. Now, that's a pretty good index. It's not perfect. But for us, when you start looking at, well, how do we become a top 50, top 75 program? And that's more of a maturation of this plan going forward. Well, we've got to start getting people in postseason play because that's where the cumulative impact is felt. And for us to be a top 75, top 100, top 50 program, as we continue to evolve and get better, it starts with getting teams in the postseason. And what does that mean? Well, yeah, it's AQs and winning the conference, but our hope is you look at a sport like softball. They had 4. Obviously, had an AQ with the championship team this year, right. But you had 3 that made it just from a RPI standpoint, and that's where as a conference, as we continue to get better, the percentage is getting more teams should increase, but it starts here and it starts with us winning.
If there was something Georgia Southern could really hang its hat on from a year ago, it's how the athletic department as a whole dealt with COVID. And we were hoping that this was going to be a post-COVID season, but with the Delta variant throwing a wrench into things. and the possibility that things may not change as much as we hope. You emphasized this morning that there could be even more challenges this year as opposed to last year whenever we expected things to get turned on their ear and how we were going to deal with all that. So how does Georgia Southern attack what could be in 21?
Yeah, well, I'll start first, and that's a great question. I think, the reason why we talk about being a different set of challenges is because you've got those that are vaccinated and those that are not,
Yeah.
and obviously we're strongly encouraging people to do their research and education and encourage people to get vaccinated. But from our vantage point, it's different in a good way. This time last year, there still was a sense of, are we going to have that first game? We're opening up school obviously for the fall matriculation. Same thing is there's no limitations from a seating standpoint at this point at Paulson Stadium for football. So, those are different, right? Because this time last year we're thinking, all right, well, 25% is kind of where we're at. What are the changes there? Now on the flip side, obviously, we still obviously from a student athlete standpoint, we're having surveillance testing, which is your weekly testing, right?
Yeah.
As the Sun Belt requires. But those that are not those that are vaccinated and are not exhibiting any symptoms, they don't take part in that protocol. Of course, the flip side is this variant, and I know enough to be dangerous, but this Delta variant spreads probably at a 4 or 5 time multiple. Yeah. So what we have to continue to do is be regimented in terms of our contact tracing and how that implements. So, it's more of probably a broad range of scenarios this year than last year. The good news is the severity from a standpoint of mass impact as far as people coming to the stadium and whatnot is not where it was last year. So really, again, we go back to we're educators and we have to continue to educate our student athletes. We're not indoctrinating them, but we're educating them on what science is saying and what ultimately our doctors are saying, and those of the Sun Belt and here locally as well. And so we're going to continue to do that. And again, as we see our vaccination rates across our team spike up, we'll continue to hopefully that's just education that we continue to expand upon.
Now, we did get a question on social media. We can give you some context that from the standpoint of Colin and I, in the partnership that Georgia Southern Athletics has with Learfield, we're handling the media rights, but there's also the corporate partnerships. And with new general manager Terry Harvin, he has been so great at getting new businesses involved. And part of the plan was the idea of naming rights on Georgia Southern's facilities. Yep. We know with the Convocation Center, but the IPF, even Paulson Stadium could be subject to that. But would that idea be specific to just the facilities, or would there be opportunities for sections in those facilities to also get naming rights from a corporate standpoint?
Yeah, you always have naming opportunities, and for example, we have let's just take the Convocation Center, right? So it's named for the late Jack and Ruth Ann Hill, and so it's the Jack and Ruth Ann Hill Convocation Center. The arena component of that, right, which is a component of the Convocation Center, can be named. Yeah. Well, within there, we obviously have opportunities for premium areas to be named, different sections. So we're doing that, and part of that's with a philanthropic giving piece, right? And then on the flip side, you have the corporate sponsorship piece, and that's where you take the indoor practice facility. There's going to be opportunities for a naming rights, and that naming right, it could be a private, family. It could be a philanthropic gift, or it could be a corporate partnership. And so I know we talked to you all about the Danny and Colin. Was it what opportunity was it? Was it the restroom, or what were those opportunities we were going to talk to you all about? But there's some opportunities for everybody involved.
Might make the most sense with us, but
yeah. No, I'm just kidding. But yes, to answer your question, there's opportunities for both corporate giving and also for sponsorships, I should say, and private giving awesome. As well. So that's a unique thing. That's what's so great about Eagle Nation is you mentioned Terry. Terry's come in, and we all help, and his leadership. We've added a ton of new corporate partners this year. And you look at last year, when you think about all the record fundraising levels we hit, and the one that I'm really proud of has nothing to do with the dollars raised. It's 75% of our major gifts last year, 33 or 44 from people never given a major gift to the university.
That's awesome.
So again, I look at it as a groundswell, but we have a long runway to go, which is a good thing.
And that kind of falls under the third priority category in resource optimization. But then you move on to the fourth one in brand engagement and fan experience. And I know this is one that's really near and dear to your heart. And you talk about everybody presenting one wow moment per event, per game, whatever it is. What do those wow moments look like? And in your mind, what does that look like from a kind of collective group?
Yeah, I mean, an example I think about is if somebody's walking in the stadium, it's their first time, and you kind of get that wide-eyed freshman look where you're like, "Where am I going?" Well, do you point the person in the right direction, or do you walk them there? Right? That's just a small example. One of the things we're talking about this year are unique experiences. One of the things we've talked about is can we find a way to identify people's first time in Paulson and on the back end send them a certificate to recognize it. We're trying to find customizable experiences, and I can't share with all because some of those I want to be surprises, but I just think that for us, I want this to be a family environment,
Sure.
but also I want to have an opportunity to embrace our history and find out what are opportunities to further promote kids on the hill, right? There's just a lot of opportunities, and I almost gave away one of the ideas, but there's just some things for us that who is our who? So we think about our who, like who are we for? We're for our student athletes, right, and our staff and coaches, but we're who our fans and donors, and we've said before is that's why we're out in the parking lots and the ticket gates and throughout the stadium is I want our fans from the time they pull in the parking lot to the time they leave to feel like, one, we have a high care level, right? We care so much for them. Two, we try to give them the best experience possible, right? And so when they spend their hard-earned money, they feel like they're getting a good return on their investment. And three, the one thing that there's no school in the country that can top is the passion for Georgia Southern.
Absolutely.
And we are stronger together as Eagle Nation, as members, than separated. And so you think about when we have these 6 games this year, and by the way, as y'all know, we have the best home schedule in the history, arguably, of our football program.
Yes, I would agree
And
with
so, yes, the spotlight's going to be on us, but that's a good thing, right? Because I want people to come to games, and some of the stuff we did last year, only a reduced crowd saw, and my hope is to say, hey, we had a great experience, and we're not above reproach. I mean, we're going to make mistakes, and I hope that our fans can offer us feedback in a constructive way of how we get better.
Yeah, the only full crowd you've seen was the Georgia Southern baseball game
yeah.
a year and a half ago. So you haven't seen a full Paulson Stadium yet. So I would
which is exciting. And
again, get ready for that one.
I was last year I was able to get around pretty much almost all with tailgating, and this year I think I was thinking mathematically, just being a math guy, finance guy, of how from the time before the game, I don't think it's possible to hit every tailgate anymore, just because the lots can be full.
You're gonna have too much food to eat.
Yeah, well, it's a combination of one eating too much and two spilling something on a shirt. And
never wear white for home.
No, I always have a backup shirt, And I also learned it's funny because I've had several of my mentors and people I've grown up with. They would wear a jacket, like a suit jacket or stuff, and I'm just like, listen, that's overdressing. I already am a sweater anyway, so I'll just keep it in a polo and keep it casual. And I'll wear some hats sometimes too, because otherwise, I mean. When you have a receding hairline, you're already kind of just losing that. It kind of look like, Willy Wonka a little bit. So.
The last part of the strategic plan is the do right, the diversity and integrity. And the 5 points of this, I think, really hit home, especially what has kind of happened the past year and being able to build on that of what has already been put in place here at Georgia Southern and building off of it for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, to me, we talked about, do right, which is Coach Russell. Obviously, he talked about Coach Russell mentioned do right, and that's we use that a lot, and probably overuse it in a good way. But for us, when you go back we want to create an environment where, listen, I don't want a homogenous organization. Everyone thinks like me, and it looks like me and acts like me, whatever. And so part of that is trying to embrace everyone where they come from, their backgrounds and whatnot. And then I also mentioned today too about the integrity piece where. I flat out told our coaches that, if they are faced with a decision of whether to cheat or not, they cheat, they won't work here. I will personally escort them out. And we're going to do things the right way. We're not going to cut corners. Now, is that more challenging for a school like us? Absolutely. Is it challenging for Georgia Southern with a one-time transfer exemption? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is it challenging, or are there some inherent advantages for name, image, likeness, right, for other schools? Absolutely. But, I'll share with you, in my last institution – we had half the budget of Texas A&M, right, at Mississippi State. And if that's the case, then if it's all about money, why roll the ball out there? Well, again, there were times we beat the rear end, right? And so to me, it's not always about money. Are we going to grow our resources? 100%, right? That's our goal is to try to continue to resource our sports and student athletes as best we can. But I will share with you, there's common things that are non-negotiables. for us as a program and for me just in my role, and we're not going to cheat. We're going to have high integrity. Listen, I sin every day and I make mistakes every day, and by His grace I'm saved. But I also will share with you too that we're trying to create bad habits, instances where we're not being successful from becoming a habit and a pattern. And that's part of what we talked about today was, listen, ask for permission on the front end, not for forgiveness. So, listen, today's world, the NCAA, everything's changing. We'll probably have a new manual, new rule book here soon.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the core of who we are comes back to are we doing right by people? And listen, we talked about we're going to be demanding, but not demeaning, right? And the three things we talked about all last year, you talked about dealing with adversity, was, really controlling your attitude, right? Controlling your effort, and treating people well, treating people as you would yourself. And those are biblical principles, but they're also principles of just being a good person. And so everyone loves to talk about being blue collar, but are your behaviors reflecting that?
Yeah.
Because, oh, hey, I'm blue collar, man, that's awesome. Well, what are you looking at your schedule and are you being blue collar? Because if you're not, then you're being a hypocritical of being blue collar, right? And so I think it's a good refresher again this morning just to talk about what's our identity, right? As Coach Russell said, our colors are blue and white. We talked about branding, right? And so for us, we're stronger together as a team, and I don't expect everyone to always like each other to hang out after outside hours, but I expect when they come into the office and we're at on campus, for everyone to pull on the same side of the road with purpose and intent. And that's a non-negotiable. And for us to reach our full potential, we have to be more intentful, more impactful, and be together as a close-knit group. Because here's the thing we don't have. I've been in places before there's tons of layers of bureaucracy. We don't have that here. So we can be very nimble and be very flexible in our approach. But it takes people bending together saying, listen, it's not about me, it's not about you or you. Collectively, how can we impact Georgia Southern? And the last thing I'll share, too, well, the two questions, y'all heard this morning, the two questions we have to ask ourselves every day is how do we positively impact, how do we make Georgia Southern better? How do we positively impact the university, right? It's the first question. And the second question was how do we positively impact our student athletes? Those are two things every day when we walk out in the parking lot we should ask ourselves. And we're going to have days where we do a great job of that and some days we don't. The good thing is we stack those good days on top of each other, and then collectively you see the difference.
Finally, before we let you go, got a question on Facebook Live coming from my buddy Glenn. Said, if you had to describe the brand in a sentence or two, what would it be?
It's a great question. But I would say our brand is one of history and tradition. It's one that I automatically, just from even growing up, think of Coach Russell and his impact. Blue collar. I think we talk about doing with more with less. We're going to start doing more with more. But to me, when I think about our brand, it's really the values that I was raised. I know this is more than one or two sentences, but it's the values that my parents raised me on, and that was the humility piece, the hard work piece, the treating people well piece, and nothing's expected. Like you should expect nothing. Like nothing's given to you. You got to come and earn it, and that's where I think what Georgia Southern values and Georgia Southern brand resonates with me because that's what I was raised in a household that way. And so, Glenn, going back to your question, it's one of history and tradition and Coach Russell, but it's a winning history. It's a winning tradition. And I also see us as a university where we're 27,000 students for the first time ever, obviously this year. And so we're on the rise. We're a brand on the rise. And so when I walk through the airport, if I'm at Savannah or Hartsville Jackson, wherever I'm traveling, I always wear Georgia Southern stuff because I want people to give a shout-out saying, Hail Southern or whatnot.
If somebody yells Georgia, do you say Southern back? Or?
Well, make sure they're not like barking at me. That's usually what happens. I usually don't say Georgia. Usually they bark at me. But I usually respond, well, can you please play us in football? But that's a whole other discussion. So. We'll leave that for another show.
Really appreciate your time. I know you're busy today. Got to let you go. But you've talked about ever since you've been here about the brighter days are ahead. And the brightest days and the best days are ahead. And this kind of outlines it. Appreciate you stopping by and kind of diving into it with us.
No, sure thing. Listen, guys, I mean, this is right in my wheelhouse. I love to talk about the upcoming season, but really, again, this focus on getting today's meeting and getting our department strategic plan yesterday being launched is really giving the blueprint and the vision for the next 5 years. And listen, Eagle Nation, I know you probably had a chance to read through it all, but it does lay out a bold and aggressive plan, and we all have the same goal of making Georgia Southern be the best it can be. And so I would just encourage you to find ways that you can continue to help us. And that's time and effort. If you feel compelled to give, that's great. Buy a season ticket, you name it. But our best days are ahead, and Eagle Nation's a huge part of that.
Appreciate it, Jared.
Thanks a lot, Jared.
Thank y'all.